Welcome back to Zero Gravity Live, your weightless weekly tech talk podcast, bringing all the latest discussions and goodness right to your browser or audio podcast of choice. I'm Anthony, joined by my two besties, Matt and Sterling, as usual. How's it going, Matt? Feeling better this week?
Yeah, it's going, man. I'm still trying to shake a little bit of the chest cough, but we're rocking and rolling this week. Definitely a lot better than last week. So happy to be back.
Love to hear it. And Sterling, I heard you have some interesting weather out there. It's some marine thing. How's it going for you?
You got it, man. We were actually just talking, right before this started about the marine layer on the West Coast. I learned something exactly when I started to spend a lot more time here. There's a marine layer that's right on the coast. It comes in pretty much every day, and it looks like you're going to have a super foggy day. Gets to be 9:30, 10 o'clock, boom, the marine layer burns off and you have this beautiful sunny day. I should add here rather, that just a little bit east, they don't experience this. So this is really just the marine layer right on the coastal towns. Pretty interesting.
That is interesting. And I'm going to bring an additional layer to this show today. We have a special guest. If you saw the show title or the announcement, you already know. We're going to bring on our special guest, Steve Firms from Veeam Technology. Welcome to the show, Steve.
Glad to be here, folks. Thank you. And Sterling, I can associate with your marine layer. The marine layer is 90 feet in front of me, and you're absolutely right. The fog comes in and then just burns off about this time, which it's 11 o'clock. So
like magic, right? I mean, Steve, it actually took me a little bit of time. I really thought all these days were sort of ruined. And my girlfriend kept saying, hey, no, wait, just listen. It's going to get perfect. And every day around the same time, it pretty much burns off, huh?
Yeah. And like I said, right now, looking at the bay, looks like a mirror. In about 1 o'clock, the wind will pick up. We'll get white caps till about 5. And which is very important to know when you're out there in a kayak. So, yeah.
Go ahead, Matt.
I was just going to say, yeah, that sounds like need to know information there, Steve.
Yeah.
It was very enlightening, that first after lunch kayak little trip I took down the bay, and all of a sudden the white caps came in, and yeah.
That sounds like it'd be tough.
So I want to get a little bit into your geographical location, Steve, because we usually play a game on the show called What's in Your Office, but I'm learning that your office is more interesting than whatever's inside of it. So would you mind walking us through where you are right now and what makes it so special?
Sure. So I always tell people, go to Canada, turn around about a half hour. That's where you'll find me. So I'm up in northern Maine, called down east. Not quite sure. It's very east, but it's not very down.
I thought I was down east, but yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, exactly. So about an hour north of Bar Harbor. So it's great, right on the ocean / bay / cold water. But yeah, I do live in a 26-foot circle. It's a dome. So as far as my office, it's my office, kitchen, living room, bedroom. Like I said, that plywood behind me, that's the bottom of my bed. So when it's time to sleep, you drop the bed down.
So Steve, I've got to give
so many questions.
I have to give people a graphical reference to explain what it is you're referring to. Do I have permission to share your house?
Go for it.
All right. So for those of you who are wondering, this is Steve's dome.
How cool is that?
Is amazing.
That is awesome.
How warm / cold is it, like insulated?
First question.
So good question. So this year we put in some radiant insulation, little 1/4 inch, aluminum foil, sort of like what you see when people, do a marathon at the end. They throw those little aluminum blankets over them. Mm-hmm. Pretty much the same sort of material. Right now to keep the heat out. As you can see, about 1/3 of the dome, the front is all, it's a big greenhouse. And the top, which you can't see, the top is also the same material. So when you lie in bed at night and look up, like just the other night, I could see the Perseid meteor shower. Just
wow.
because there's absolutely zero light pollution up here. So
Yeah.
it's pretty amazing. As we speak, yeah, it's 81 degrees inside the dome. And I want to say it's probably in the 60s outside the dome.
Oh wow, that's nice. That's
So,
nice.
and to your marine layer conversation, absolutely correct. It'll be again where I am now is 90 feet from the water. Right now it's 75. But if I go 100 or 200 feet to the end of my driveway, if you want to call it a driveway, it's probably 15, 20 degrees warmer.
Wow.
So,
That is amazing. I have to ask the most obvious question for all us techs on here. You're coming in pretty clear. I just saw the structure. What's the internet connection?
so yeah, satellite. So,
Okay. I'm impressed.
So I have two. I have HughesNet, which is for my low bandwidth things, cameras, I don't know, smoke detectors, all that Wi-Fi stuff that you have. That hops on that, and then I have the Starlink. So, which I think I probably have my own set of satellites because there's no one else up here. So,
love it.
And Elon is charging me. I promise you for those special satellites. So.
Oh, I bet.
I bet.
Wow. I mean, for that view, I too could live in a dome. Amen. That's fantastic.
Wow.
Yeah. It is great. But again, 3:30, 4 o'clock when the lobster boats are out putting around, picking up the traps. Yeah. So.
Yeah.
Do you ever have them just toss you a couple just on their way by when they wave?
Well, I actually have 5 of my own pots because being a Maine resident. So yeah, go out there in my little rowboat and I pull them up every so often. It's kind of cool.
Well, we know where our off-campus excursion is going to be next, gentlemen.
Yes.
Yeah, I definitely think you win the trophy on the coolest house we've had on the show yet.
Yeah. By far. That's amazing. Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that, Steve. Sure. Truly have not seen something like that before, and awesome to get to ask these questions.
Yeah, it looks like a Danger Will Robinson, doesn't it? Dating myself, but I bet if you were to Google Lost in Space, I bet you it's pretty close to what it looks like. The Jupiter, right? I think it was the Jupiter 2 or something. Yeah,
Yeah.
Yes. Wow. That is a throwback. I haven't thought about that since I was a kid.
Yeah. Now you make me feel.
So we know where Steve is watching from, but as the little doobly-doo down below, we would love to know where everyone else is watching from. You don't have to be in a dome to let us know. We are curious geographically where you're tuning in from. Let us know in the chat of your choice. We'll give you a shout out. We always love to hear it. Now, Sterling and Matt, it's going to be very hard to compete with what we just saw, but do y'all have anything in your office you want to share today?
You know what, Matt? Let me go first because this is going to be so underwhelming after what Steve said that you should follow it up with something that brings us back up. Mine is super quick and super cool. And anybody out there that deals with heat, they're walking around. We went on a winery tour this past weekend. Anybody that's kind of connected to me on the socials may have seen some of that stuff. And let me tell you, inland in Temecula, it was over 100 degrees. And you're walking around from these places, you're outdoors for a lot of times. This right here was a lifesaver. And it's probably not what you're thinking it is. It is not any kind of a large lipstick or anything like that.
A party popper, right?
It is actually a fan, guys. It is a directional fan with a 22-hour. Oh, we laugh right now. But let me tell you, when it was 100 and some degrees out there, to just feel that on your face was amazing. 2 speeds, 22 hours. I'm sold. That's my
22 hours is a 22 lot of hours for a fan.
That's what I'm saying. So
okay. All right. That's not as underwhelming as I thought it would be.
Right?
Nicely done.
I like how you went first, Sterling, because so since we're on the topic of heat, you guys are talking about the marine thing that burns off. Here in the South, we have the humidity layer that never goes anywhere. It doesn't burn off. It just gets worse. And, while your fan is cool, Sterling, and you can carry in your pocket, this is my new ad.
Whoa.
And this is like the coolest thing I think I've bought myself in a while with regards to like a fan. And what this is so I have all the Ego products. These are battery operated, yard tools, if you will. So I have an edger, I've got a chainsaw, I've got a blower, a hedge trimmer, all this type of stuff. and it all runs on the same style battery. Well, I was at my daughter's very first softball practice this past Saturday. Like you say, I mean, it had to have been 100 degrees, middle of the day. There's not a cloud in the sky, there's no shade, just sitting out there melting. This homeboy beside me pulls out this fan. He pulls, now the fan is cool, right? If all it did was blow air, that's one thing, but notice it says misting.
It's got
And
a
what's
mister.
really
Yeah.
cool about this is it's got a little pickup line, and you can bring a small collapsible cooler full of ice water, drop the pickup line in the cooler. The pump is all built into the fan.
Wow.
So you literally turn this thing on, and it's got two levels of misting, either continuous or pulsing, where it'll, spray for a minute and stop, spray for a minute and stop to give you that feeling of cool air. Collapsible telescoping arm, just like your carry-on. It's got wheels, and it uses those same batteries. And you're talking about time, Sterling. This one will run up to 60 hours
What?
on one of these 5 amp hour batteries. And I was like, take my money, please. So I have
Wow.
this thing out in the garage, and it will probably never come out of the back of my Jeep. It will always be with me for all the practices that we take the kids to.
That's fantastic.
Freaking
Honestly,
crazy.
That's awesome. That's a game changer. I was
Yeah.
I was just saying this before as well, but back in my days of racing dirt bikes and being out there in the heat and all that gear, I wish I would have had that. I didn't have a motorhome like all those other kids out there, so that would have been a game changer for me. What do you think, Steve? Could you use something like that up where you are?
I could use a reverse mister because, like you said, I get that fog bank up there all the time. So yeah, if I get too warm, I just got to walk down there and I get misted. But yes, that would be very cool.
You just need a dryer.
Exactly.
All right, that's good.
We're quite fond of the dehumidifiers in Florida because it can just be unbearably humid.
I've got something else I want to share while we're on the cool
Yeah.
tech, gizmo gadget topic before we get into the API. I came across this the other day. I had to share it, and I'm going to save the best part for last.
Okay.
So, Dyson, when you think about Dyson, you obviously think about headphones, right?
Fans and vacuums.
Like
which
never.
I have
Exactly.
both of.
So I was like, wait a minute. So you've got, Apple doing the AirPod Maxes, that Anthony and I both have, love them. You've got, all these audio files that are very particular about their headwear and their headphones. I came across this and I'm like, really? You're making vacuum cleaners and fans, so you just decide to get into the audio game. What I think is hilarious about this, and I have not heard these, I've not tested these in a store or anything like that. I mean, they're okay, they're stylish, I suppose. Wait for it. Remember, what does Dyson do? What's one of their specialties? Vacuum,
blow air.
Vacuums, air,
and fans, right?
innovation. Yes.
So wait for it. We're still scrolling. It looks just like a headphones, right?
Oh,
Yeah.
no, I know where this is going.
Nothing unique.
Do you know where it's going?
I know where this is going.
Where's the attachment? There it is. What? Where's the attachment?
Dude, I came across this and I was like, what on God's green earth is going on here? And basically what that is an attachment for your headphones that blows a continuous stream of purified air into your nose. And I'm like, was it trying to like be the mask of the COVID era? Is it just so you can walk through an airport and you get fresh air? I can't wait to see the first person rocking one of these in public so I can just stop for a minute and just
Why'd they have to make it reflective? Like, you literally look like a Star Wars villain walking around with that thing on your face.
Bro,
Yeah.
I would love to hear y'all's thoughts on this one.
I never knew I needed purified air coming in my mouth hole when I was listening to music before, but apparently I need it now.
Like purified air in my.
What am I seeing?
First of all, I don't know, but you always have that person next to you on the plane that coughs a lot, and you wish that you could just direct some air right at you and kind of get. Maybe this answers that. I don't know.
I've got no words.
Hey, but you know what?
What do you think?
Private conversations. Private conversations. That's what I'm thinking. I mean, you can whisper to people, you can talk, they can't hear you. I don't know.
I just thought that's the funniest thing I may have ever seen a legit reputable company come out with, because I love their vacuums.
Yeah.
I've got their vacuums. Heck, I've even got the first gen robot vacuum that Dyson made that doesn't work at all. But their normal vacuums are great. I've got some of their bladeless fans and all that kind of stuff. But come on, guys.
Well, if there's one thing we know about Dyson is they're also not cheap. So what's this price point?
Oh
then?
no,
dude,
this is gonna be expensive.
$4.99.
That's without the attachment, right? Where's
I'm
the
sure that
attachment?
doesn't
Scroll over.
include the attachment.
Scroll over, Matt. Scroll. I see a wildly another number. There we go.
Oh, look! It's got the noise canceling.
There we go.
Oh my god, what are they calling this accessory? Not the visor sleeve.
Attachable visor.
Yeah, attachable visor. Contact-free visor attaches to supply purified air when you need it.
Yeah. When you need it. Because you never know when the need might arise.
Yeah.
It's great.
Well, that's interesting.
I
have questions,
The AI pants, that we talked about, that was an epic fail. I'm just saying.
We love talking about useless technology on the show.
Anyway,
it's like a James Bond scuba thing.
Yes, exactly. It's exactly what that looks like.
Go
well said, Steve.
Yeah.
Now, that's interesting.
I'll use that when the when the white caps come in, the kayak flips over. Now I'll just sink and walk under the bay. That works perfect.
But while you're listening to your favorite tunes, no less.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean,
honestly, the headphones look good.
If you could keep the water out of your ears and get air, I mean, that would be cool. That would be cool tech. But this is not that.
No. All right. So that's my topics for the day.
Thanks for blowing my mind today, man.
That was hilarious.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, before we get into the SOS API discussion, Sterling, I think you had something to share too, didn't you?
Just real quick, and this is actually something that's sort of on the cool scale, kind of like what Matt shared as well. And everybody knows here that I'm a Microsoft fanboy, but hey, sometimes I show some love to the other side, and once again, this is for you, Matt. And so here's what I have today. Today, we have a way to reuse your tech. I'm talking about not taking your old watches and giving them to your grandmom or donating them somewhere else, or worse yet, throwing them in the bin. I have a perfect way for you to reuse your old Apple Watches, and that is with this wonderful case here that turns it into a minimalist phone. You can take any size of your watches from the 41, I believe 44, 45, even the Apple Watch Ultra, and it turns it into a small minimalist phone that has those iPod-like features.
No way.
I thought this was pretty cool. I just wanted to share it with everybody out there. We probably all have these old watches. We've gotten the new watch. We're not using the old watches anymore. They are claiming multiple days of use if you turn off things like the tilt to wake feature, which you obviously don't need here, and some other things which you can easily drop your phone, pick this guy up if it's one of the cellular connectivity watches, and move along your day. And so I'll just stop right there, and just because this is what I wanted to share with everybody. So, once again, giving Apple some love too. But I thought this was a really cool gadget. What do you guys think?
As a dude who has a freaking busted Apple Watch on his desk over here, the problem is that the 5G signal doesn't work. But if I could repurpose this, that's actually pretty cool. So I'm just waiting for the new one, and this one's just sitting here doing nothing. I love it.
The biggest question is, does it do haptic feedback when you scroll?
Oh,
just like the old iPads or the iPods. If it would do the little haptic scroll, you'd have me sold for sure.
You know what? I don't know if it explicitly calls this out. I almost want to guess yes, because specifically what this article does talk about is that little scroll wheel, the way that they mechanized it inside so that it turns the crown, they believe is not going to get an Apple patent flaw, right? So they think it's going to be safe. So I would say it would hold that haptic feedback because it's essentially turning the crown.
That's interesting.
Cool, right?
That is pretty cool.
Looking at that.
That is pretty cool.
So that's my thing for today.
Look at you not digging on Apple for once.
Hey, I'm proud of you, Sterling.
Yeah,
it's important.
I know it was tough.
It was tough. Now I just need one of those for the Microsoft band. Okay,
there you go.
We're done.
Yeah, I was waiting for it.
We're done. Had to.
All right. Well, thank you for sharing those. Well, one of them was cool. One of them was questionable. We need to do more research before we find out whether or not we'll be wearing the face breathers moving forward. But
Yeah.
let's get into the meat of today, shall we? So we brought on Steve because Steve is the expert in all things SOS. That's Smart Object Storage API. It came out in, when did it release? Veeam version 11 or 12?
Version
12. So, what we found, we work here at Object First. We deal with object storage all day and night, and it only works for Veeam. But in our travels, a lot of folks don't know much about the SOS API, but it is a pretty pivotal feature in Veeam version 12, and it brings a lot of nuanced functionality to the product that wasn't there before. So real quick, before we get into it, would you mind just running us through, like, what is it, Steve, in your opinion?
Sure. And I digress. Notice above me, the light is coming.
There it is. There it is.
Because we're toward the roof. So I'm sort of like that ant that people torture with a magnifying glass. So I spend most of my day avoiding the sun. So yeah, we got to speak quick because I'm about to melt. So, never each other. But so the SOS API, I think it's revolutionary from Veeam's perspective, because when we started our object storage journey back in version 9.5.4, 6 years ago, we noticed that object storage had a lot of strengths, a lot of potential. But one of the ways that we were looking at was how can we tap certain features, functionality within Veeam VBR with our object storage partners, right? And we started working on this, again, Smart Object Storage API, SOS API. And some of the things we did is, it is an API, but it's really, it's almost like a communication conduit, sort of like chats, like we're doing our little webinar. We have, customer chat, we have private chats. This is a way for us, being Veeam and object storage partners like Object First, to share information, right? That it's at a level that's, integrated between us as partners. So for instance, the first one we can talk about is, capacity, right? When 9.5.4 came out, and certainly version 10, version 11, you would notice, within the Veeam console, right, you'd have, for your block and file repositories, you would see space available, space utilized, percentages, a lot of information pertaining to the repository that, the block and file storage was, backing. Then you'd go and you'd add yourself an object storage repository, and you would notice that all of those columns had wonderful n/a, right, not available, because we couldn't extract that information. Because as with object storage with buckets, it's not as easy as just going out to having a little block and file, like in my home lab, I'm sure everyone has little NAS devices or something. Very easy, right? It's got a disk or two, it's got, I don't know, 10 terabytes of storage, whatever. Pretty simple to identify, how much storage there is, how much storage is available, right? But with object storage, you don't have that. You have these, abstract concepts of a bucket, right? Okay, but the capacity is really in the cluster, right? The bucket is just sort of a thing that's, quote unquote, holding the objects with the prefixes and all that fun stuff. So that's why when the first iteration of the SOS API in version 12 came out, one of the first things we did was, all right, send us the capacity. Now, obviously we use that within the console, as I mentioned, for information purposes. We also use it within our wizards, as far as when you go through and you create the repository, you can actually see, oh yeah, this extent will have X amount of capacity available. But we also do it for our data placement, right? So when we go to do our backups, especially with version 12.1, where you can have multiple extents now, object storage extents that are SOS API enabled. Now, if you were to have a sober with I don't half dozen object first repositories. Now, when we go to do a backup, we can actually say, okay, well, let's I'm backing up a terabyte. Well, does bucket 1 have enough space? If not, we'll go use bucket 2. If not, we'll go use bucket 3. So we have some intelligence now that what we've had for years with block and file, that same data placement intelligence now is applicable to object storage. Additionally, we have the smart entity, right, which goes hand in hand. So again, now I'm backing up my laptop, and honestly, I have no idea how large my hard drive is. Let's just say it's a couple terabytes. So, what we do is we would then send to object first. Hey, I'm about to back up Steve's laptop, and here comes a 1 terabyte workload. You folks have the intelligence built in that now this 1 terabyte workload is coming up to you. Now you can, on your side, do some load balancing, right? If you have a multiple node cluster, you will be able to say, okay, well, node 1 is busy. Let's send this workload to node 2. And then if some other machine was to get backed up, now you can say, okay, well, now node 2 is busy. Let's go to node 1 or node 3. Pick your node. So those are two of the more powerful SOS API features. Now, the way SOS API is, and we call it an API, but it's really a bunch of XML files, right? And that's how we communicate. So what's really great about that is when we go to add new features and new functionality to the SOS API, it's not like the S3 APIs, right? If someone was to make a change to one of them, it's a pretty big impact, right? To certainly software like us who use it and folks like you who actually implement it. When we make a change to the SOS API, it's really just adding a stanza, to the XML file. So if we were to do things like, possibly down the line, let's say we were to control object size or number of objects in a deletion or maximum number of connections. There's a whole bunch of tuning possibilities that we could add to the SOS API. It's as simple as, all right, now we're just going to add a line to this XML so for example, like in 12.1, I think it was 12.1, yeah, we added a stanza for the on-prem cold storage, on-prem Glacier, if you would. And there was no change to, right now, only, I think, 2 or 3 partners out of the 50 object storage partners utilize that. But there was no change. Like we didn't have to send out this panic email like, hey, we're making a change to the SOS API, and everyone has to re-architect their software to accommodate. No, it was just as simple as, hey, we got this new stanza. If you want to take advantage of it, go for it. And that type of flexibility makes it extremely simple to implement, yet very powerful.
Steve, one of the things, if we could maybe take a step back, that I was thinking of as you were explaining, like the smart entities and the capacity and essentially what the API provides, is if we take a step back and look at object storage, when you first look at the implementations of object storage, most of them were cloud-based, and in more recent years, we see them being on-prem based. A lot of times, though, when you look at, other potential solutions, they haven't really adapted the technology to work optimally on-prem. They essentially did a carbon copy or a cookie cut of what was in the cloud and put it on-prem and expected it to perform up to Veeam's level of standards, super fast, ingest speeds, super fast IO to do things like instant recovery. And I know personally, I've seen some struggles with some other solutions that have erasure coding, as an example, on-prem when they run, databases, and they're expecting the performance to be able to stay up to par with what Veeam is asking for. within that database. Almost like I've described it in the past as essentially being like a traffic cop. If Veeam is asking for a block of data and you're backing up directly to an erasure coded solution, you have to wait on that solution to go find the block, query the database, and report back to Veeam to where it is. And if you were doing, and I want to pose this question to get your insights on it, but if you were doing a sequential restore, perhaps that's not as big of an issue. But if you're trying to run, let's say 5 or 10 or 15 instant recovered VMs at the same time, that can pose a performance bottleneck or handicap when you're looking at that. And the way that I look at Object First and UTB, the way that we implemented our technology the way we did, is we focused on being just one stop in the data lifecycle. We're supposed to be that initial backup target for Veeam. We still definitely encourage folks to tier off 3, 2, 1, get off site, get it as many places as possible, so that if you had a node failure, you're protected, right? Because you have the data elsewhere. If you have an internal disk failure, you're good, even with us, right? Because we run RAID 6, but we're not sacrificing performance and complexity and therefore cost to have to implement an on-prem erasure coded solution, right? So I think the Smart Object Storage API plays into that story with how we're able to do that and still maintain performance that Veeam customers expect.
Absolutely. I mean, as you noted, without a doubt, the number one issue that we have is performance with object storage, especially as you noted with like the instant VM recovery, or especially when you're doing multiple, simultaneous, instant VM recoveries. And that's because, exactly as you noted, when, again, 6 years ago when we came out with 954, on-prem object storage was definitely in its beginning stages, right? I mean, there were maybe a handful of partners, but as you said, they modeled themselves after the very successful public cloud model, right? And certainly AWS being the predominant one. But as you noted, Veeam is very unique with the way that we approach the use, or some would say abuse, of object storage, right? Object storage has always been, the larger the object, the better they behave. Right. As you said, it's phenomenal for, hey, if I wanted to store, millions of, movies and videos and you wanted to stream them, yep. Phenomenal use case, right? And it's been like that for decades, right? Yeah. I mean, it's phenomenal. That's what it's built for, it's not ideal for transactional, or at least it wasn't ideal for transactional, to exactly the points that you mentioned. Having these databases, keeping track of objects, right? And, our best practice is to have a 1 meg, object size, block size. Then you add on, deduplication and compression. Very rarely are you going to get an object that gets written to Object First that is 1 meg in size. It's most likely going to be significantly smaller. And there's going to be a ton of them. So when we say a ton, I'm talking millions, if not billions, of objects. And if you were to have, as you said, a database that had to keep track of all of these objects, all of these metadata, and it's certainly as you're doing these instant recoveries, I need to build, for those again not familiar with Veeam's instant recovery technology, what it does is we take the objects from the backups and we build, use the analogy, we rebuild Humpty Dumpty, right? So we take all those little objects and we put them together and we make a virtual machine. It's going to be, resource intensive because there's a lot of, we have to find all those objects. And that's where having that 1 meg size is, we find, more efficient because, let's say we used, 16 meg. Well, if I was rebuilding, my little, my laptop, for example, and there's, a 16K Word doc or something, well, I'd have to read, a 16 meg object to just get that little piece, right? Yeah. Very inefficient. So that's where, UTB, in Object First is unique because all the other partners who, had existing object storage solutions when 954 came out and over the duration of the last 6 years, to their credit, they've done a lot of work re-architecting and re-engineering their product to work specifically for Veeam, where you folks came out of the gate built for Veeam, right? So you don't have to go through all these, bending over backwards and crazy, hacks or modifications to make your software work with Veeam while also working with other products. You folks don't have that. You are, focused on, Veeam and Veeam only. So, UPI is designed to work with Veeam. And part of that design is through the SOS API. Because as you said, we can share that information, right? We can send to you, hey, here is this workload coming up. Yep. You then do your magic behind the scenes where others, haven't taken advantage yet of that technology because they already have their pre-existing, load balancing or, workload management that, for them to have a unique system just for Veeam would be a complete rewrite of their, software, their system. And that's where, you folks take advantage of the smart entity and the capacity. You do everything that's available in the SOS API pretty much to make that integration seamless. And again, that's where if you go to the Veeam console, you'll see, a non-SOS API repository is, S3 compatible, where if you're SOS API enabled, you are considered, S3 integrated. You are truly integrated with our software. So there is a level of integration that is not present with those that don't use the SOS API. And again, what I see, in the future, because I remember Anton, again, 5 or 6 years ago, Anton Gossov, made a statement, I think it was at a Veeam or something that said, hey, within, 4 to 5 years, we see all, secondary backup storage being object storage. He was pretty prophetic. That's pretty much what we see. And by no means am I putting myself in the same category. My prophetic vision is, I believe, again, certainly since 12.1 came out and some of the scaling capabilities that now are there for SOS API, I truly think that Object First and UPI is going to drive this performance revolution within Veeam VBR for object storage. And it's going to be driven primarily because of the SOS API. So, I do see the SOS API is going to, if nothing, grow. And I think it's going to be, as you said at the beginning, not many people know about it. I think going forward, it's going to be a requirement from the customers.
I think that's a solid point, especially the points about the customers. It wasn't just the companies that were trying to re-architect themselves to sort of be on premises. It was left up to the customers to go into guides and to change the block size, to add their own encryption, to do all these things. And really what the SOS API, from listening to you and sort of everybody else listening out there, it allows us to sort of glean that information. It allows these solutions, the UPI, the Object First, to come tuned for the customer, so they can get the utmost piece of that security without having to architect it all underneath. I love the part that you said about all these new features that come. They also come just as seamlessly because there's no updates to do. There's no new API to grab. It's almost like a little mini framework that we're able to glean directly from that. You have certain things that it does just automatically for us. The placement policy of the enhanced scale-up backup repository. And there's information that it gives us that allows us to place workloads where they need to be, like the smart entities. So I really appreciate that clarification there.
No, good point, Sean. And and I think that's it, because Veeam's always been set and forget, right? That's always been one of the huge selling points of Veeam or VBR, didn't require an army, right? I've worked for other backup products, and you needed literally staff to manage and feed the beast and take care of it every day. And that's not the case with Veeam. But object storage, especially on-prem object storage, started to become a burden, right? People would say, yeah, well, I don't really have to configure or do anything with, VBR, but I'm spending, 5-6 hours a day tuning and tweaking and trying to get my object storage to work.
Yeah.
And that's not the case with UTB. And as you said, it's primarily because of the SOS API.
Spot on.
Yep. Well, I do want to thank you, Steve, for bringing all this information. I was going to ask, what's next, but you already covered it. So I feel like we have a really great idea now of what it is. I love that you give us the shout out specifically on how we're using it today and a little bit of the future facing what's next. I also want to call out, Matt actually did some work on SOS in the past. Matt, you have a QR code you want to put up, right, and share?
Yeah, I can toss that up right now.
Thank you. So if you want to learn more about it, we've put some information together. Matt put some information together. It's a great additional resource. I want to thank you again, Steve, for bringing this information on the show, because it's just something that even we at Object First, we know we use it, and a lot of it, if you're in R&D specifically, how, but it's always good to learn more about these kind of things. So thank you again for bringing that info. Now, I want to make sure we get through our final few topics here before the sun melts Steve in his dome, because I see it. I've been watching it. It's coming down. It's about to hit you.
It's coming.
He's talking.
What this looks like? This looks like a scene from Unsolved Mysteries. Y'all remember that in the 90s, where somebody's like giving a testimonial, but they don't really want to be on camera, but they're too lazy to blur the face, just sitting in the dark.
When he started, his glasses were clear. That's just what I want to point out.
The top of my head is getting hot.
All right. We're gonna work through these final topics pretty quick then. Matt, you got something for us today, right?
This is great. That's great. Yes, I do. So let me throw the sharing back up. I'll be quick on this one. Again, what was the latest thing that was going on? AI, once again, at the top of the list. No surprise here. I thought this was interesting because ChatGPT went a little rogue in this case and started using the voice learning and the voice recognition without permission.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a short article. It just goes on to talk about how that happened, and of course the guy was ticked off because he was about to ask it to sing him a song, and so they put some safeguards in place to prevent unauthorized usage of personal voice recordings. But to me, we've talked a bit that these topics at length on this show before, and it's like when you look at voice cloning, that is such a slippery slope. Mm-hmm. And Anthony, I think you've made this comment before. I feel like we need some sort of governing body to enforce some sort of watermark on all AI generated impersonation variables, whether it's themselves, whether it's their voice. There needs to be something that says this was computer generated. Otherwise, I think we're definitely not headed for the right track on this one.
I am, again, terrified. I feel like every week I waver between AI is great, AI is going to kill us all. I don't like the outcome of this one. And I get it. At the end of the day, it's all learning, right? It's just learning and then regurgitating and then learning and regurgitating. But it's to the point you made that I made, that we all made weeks back, is if this doesn't get regulated and if we don't start thinking about it seriously, someone is going to take this too far and it is going to be out of control.
Well, you see the title, OpenAI AI just leaked the plot of the Black Mirror's next season.
Love it.
That's a little concerning, but yeah, that's where we are apparently.
That's classic.
Yeah. Never stops.
Well, I also have some great news for everyone today. If you didn't know, you're about to know. It's not good. All of our social security numbers are probably out there in the open now. I don't know if you've heard about this, but last week, in the last week, there was a big leak that came out. It was posted on the internet by this funny little anime character named Fennis, but it comprised 2.9 billion plain text records, and you can see here exactly what it is. ID, first name, last name, date of birth, address, city, country, name, state, zip code, phone number, full name, aka full name 1, aka full name 2, full name 3,
Wow.
and social security number. So if you're running under an alias, they know who you are. If you have a social security number, if you're a human being, you do, they know that too. I bring this all up to say, one, we've talked about this for a long time. There is no amount of security that can go anything from happening. But the best thing you can do is to be a security-minded individual and to assume breach at all times. We talk about zero trust a lot. This is zero trust in the real world.
Yep.
Put a lock on your credit scores if you think you might be vulnerable or compromised. Make sure you're actively monitoring all of your financial accounts and anything that you can use a social security number to get into, because this is a big, bad one. And it's going to do a lot of damage to a lot of people who are unaware. So make sure you also share this information with anyone you know as well who might not be watching the show or technically savvy.
Believe it or not, of all the things that you've shared, this is honestly the one that really concerns me the most. If we think about the things that are tied to us, how we get credit, how we maneuver through life, how we maneuver through this society, it really all comes down to our ID specifically. And these are exact ways that somebody can open up new lines of credit, mimic your identity, period, and go and do nefarious activities. And now you're on the hook for those things. This is truly concerning and something that we need to figure out a wrangle in and definitely spread the word.
This is exactly how my identity was stolen when Equifax was breached all those 7+ years ago. So I've experienced this firsthand, and it's not good. Well, someone was going to say something?
Yeah, I was going to say, back in the day, and I don't know what back in the day means in this context. I don't know if we're talking 10 years ago-ish, something like that.
Yeah.
But having access to your credit reports and score wasn't always just at your fingertips. Like, I remember you could always get 3 full copies of your credit report once a year, for free. And your credit score, typically you'd have to pay and they'd calculate it and show you what your score is. Well, Credit Karma, no plug to them on the app, is a brilliant app for all that. And, one of the things I always love about it is it's monitoring all kinds of different aspects of your credit life. And if there's a report, let's say you go buy a new car and you put in financing, it immediately pops up. There's been a new inquiry on your credit report. Having something like that just in your back pocket as well to alert you about these things long before it's gone down the line of all these, attacks and all this, malicious bad acts when they have your credit, your social security, your driver's license and things like that. I think that's one way you can at least be alerted. Yeah. It's free. You don't have to pay anything for it, and it's right there on your smartphone. And I love that app personally.
Yeah. And a lot of banks include it now with, if you have a credit card through a major lender, or if you're banking with a major bank, you can get credit scores directly through those. So do keep an eye on that and make sure you freeze your accounts if otherwise you feel you might be further compromised with this leak.
Agreed. No, thanks for sharing that, Anthony. As scary as it is, we need to know this stuff. It's a new day.
And we need to get the word out. So, just making sure I bring the Johnny Raincloud energy to close out another episode. But I do want to give thanks again, Steve. I just noticed your hat. Steve has donned an Object First hat.
It's protecting my data.
It is protecting the most important data, the ones you got in your brain. I love it. Thank you, Steve, again for joining us today, sharing the awesome state of living that you're in with your dome. Truly fascinated by it, and I have more questions, but we'll save them for another time. And thank you again for walking us through the SOS API. We all learned a lot.
Glad to be here.
Yeah, and joining us on your vacation, Steve. So again, kudos to you.
Excited to see you soon in person at your dome.
Indeed. Lobster bake.
Well, as always, thanks Matt and Sterling for being my regular hosts on the show, and thank you, the viewers, for joining us today. Make sure that if you have any questions about what we've talked about, to go to our website, objectfirst.com. We have lots of information about OOTB. That stands for out-of-the-box immutability. It provides immutable storage, and we think it is the best storage for Veeam. So be sure to check that out. And until next week, make sure to stay weightless, stay frictionless, stay zero gravity. We'll see you then.